At first glance, a road bike and a cyclocross bike look remarkably similar. They both have drop handlebars and they've got exactly the same size wheels. But look a little bit closer and there's an awful lot more than just chunky tyres that separates the two. So coming up are 5 of the key differences. I've just mentioned it, but one of the most striking differences has to be the tyres. Now, typically on a road bike, you'd be running anywhere from a 23 to a 28mm wide tyre, and it's likely to be completely slick for low rolling resistance whilst bombing along tarmac. Now, you compare that to a cyclocross tyre, which is much wider, between about a 32 and a 35mm wide, and then they also come in loads of different tread patterns to cope with a wide variety of terrains and conditions. Now, admittedly, you can go an awful long way off-road on a 28C wide road tyre, as long as you don't want to slow down or turn corners, but you're going to have an awful lot more fun on one of these. The tread gives you loads of traction for doing things like cornering and slowing down. And then the increased width also means you can run it softer, so it's going to be more comfortable over bumps and also decrease the likelihood of punctures. Traditionally, one of the biggest points of difference between the two has been the brakes. Because of the wider tyres and the need for increased mud clearance, a traditional road bike caliper brake just wouldn't work. So cyclocross bikes always tended to have cantilever brakes which bolt either side of the wheel and then pivot inwards. Now, although they are perfectly functional, the majority of them just don't really work that well. They don't. It's a fact. So cyclocross bikes were some of the first to adopt disc brake technology because the greater power, the greater modulation and the greater mud clearance were all key benefits. But now, however, with some new road bikes also adopting disc brake technology to take advantage of the better braking and also the increased tyre clearance, the two types of bikes are actually starting to look strikingly similar once again. You can use road pedals and shoes on your cyclocross bike, but if you venture off-road, you are likely to become frustrated by one of at least 3 things. Firstly, road pedals do not like getting caked in mud. They become remarkably difficult to clip into. In fact, that is actually one of Matt's top 5 excuses. And then anyone who's ever tried to run in road shoes knows that that is also very difficult. And you're also quite likely to end up on your ass. But once you've picked yourself up and you try remounting your bike, you'll also find that single-sided road pedals are actually really quite difficult to clip into when you're off-road on bumpy terrain. So if you look at the alternative, these mountain bike pedals, firstly you'll notice that they are double-sided, so all you have to do is stamp down. And then secondly, they're also really stripped down. There's a lot of holes there for mud to squeeze through, so they perform much better in muddy conditions. And then you'll also notice that the cleat is both much smaller and also recessed to allow the tread of a mountain bike shoe to contact the ground, compared to that, which looks very neat, but also very slippery. If you get to ride a cyclocross bike of a similar size to your road bike, you very quickly notice that you will be more upright. And that's because cross bikes tend to be a little bit shorter and a little bit higher. Firstly, because aerodynamics aren't so important, because you tend to be going a little bit slower off-road. And then secondly, you'll also find you get a greater feeling of control when you're riding technical terrain. And then you'll also notice that the handling tends to be a little bit different. A cross bike being a bit more stable than a racy road bike. And again, when the going gets slippery, you will definitely be glad of that. Finally, we're going to talk about gear ratios. Bear with me, it's probably not quite as dull as it sounds. Road bikes tend to have really large front chainrings, so a 50 or a 53, so that you can pedal at speeds of 50, 60, even 70 kilometers an hour. Cross bikes, however, don't ever really go that fast, so we have much smaller chainrings, generally a 36-46 combination, and that's paired with an 1128 cassette on the back still for racier types. Now you get a broad enough range of gears there to cope with both going really slowly and also relatively fast off-road. Some cross bikes, like this one, actually come with a single ring setup though, and many people just really love the simplicity of it. I mean, you get to get rid of one of your shifters, for example. And then the added bonus of this surround 1x setup is that the really strong springs in the derailleur also stop the chain bouncing around on bumpy terrain, making your bike really, really eerily quiet when you're riding it off-road. And I'm one of those people that definitely likes that. And then you'll also find the gear range of a 1x setup is broadly similar to a double, but the actual jumps between the gears tend to be a little bit larger. And so some people still prefer a double chainring setup so that they got those smaller gaps. So we have different tyres, different brakes, different pedals, different geometry, and different gear ratios. Now, if you'd like some tips on how to set up your cyclocross bike, then if you click just up there, we've got a video on that very subject. Or to throw a bit of a spanner in the works and add gravel bikes in the mix, why not click just there, where we actually went to see what a gravel bike can do that a road bike can't. Finally, before leaving to go to either of those, do make sure you subscribe to GCN. To do that, just click on the globe.